What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Breaking the Kernel. Today is a very special episode. Today, I'm really happy to introduce Ksenia. Thank you so much for joining us. And something that you do, and something that I really admire, is journalism. And I think being a journalist and being involved in the news world in general is a very difficult, sometimes daunting, sometimes people don't appreciate as much as they probably should about how much work goes into it. And so I was curious if you can start with just your journey. Like, what made you, out of all the past, I'm sure that was open to you, choose journalism as like your route?
Thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I like talking about journalism, although it's been like it's been a little bit sad last days, but
I can imagine.
I still have a lot of hope because I'm in this profession for 25 years already, and I'm being an optimist. I went through a lot, but I'm still like we need to continue what we're doing, and everything will be okay. We need to continue our mission. So as I have already mentioned, my journey started 25 years ago, almost 26 already. So I was a student in Russia. First of all, I'm born and raised in Russia. So I was a student of the Moscow University, Faculty of Journalism, and I we had that internship, the possibility of internship at one of the, I would say, even like the best news channel at that time. It was the year of 2000 when Putin just came to the power, and the channel's name was NTV. And it was like a dream channel for every journalist, every news journalist. High standards, like technological, it was very modern. The best journalists, stars, and just the style. It had its own style. So everybody wanted to get a job at NTV. And there was that internship where they hired 50 people for the internship, and then they picked only five. And I was among them, among those five. So I was super lucky, and I couldn't believe myself. I got there, and I was, I was only 20 years old, and I was seeing all those TV stars in the hallways, and they were talking to me. So it was so. It was so cool. But then since, as I said, Putin just came to the power, the channel was kind of in opposition to Putin. And I won't tell you the whole story because it will take all our podcast. If your listeners are interested, they can go to Wikipedia or read some articles, because there are a lot of articles on NTV case. It has an interesting story. So it was kind of in opposition to Putin, and it was a private channel, and so the pressure started, and it ended up by this channel taken over by the state oil company Gazprom. And by the way it happened, that it's very similar to what happened now with Voice of America, but because it was changed overnight. That new management from Gazprom, they came at night, during the night, and they just seized the channel, so took it
Wow.
over. And so the majority of the team, we decided to leave. We left the channel. We started a new one. That new one was shut down in half a year.
Oh,
And then we started a new one, the third one. That one was shut down in almost a year, also at night.
at
It was
night.
all done at night.
Okay. I'm
Like,
sensing the theme.
yeah, broadcasting, and then we go off air, and that's it. So after that, I was 23, still very young, and it just happened that I was already a host. I was a reporter and a morning host,
Okay.
and I was covering like tragic events, like that hostage crisis in the theater, Moscow theater. You probably heard about that in
Yeah.
2002. So I was a host. We were taking turns, like we were covering it. We had special coverage nonstop, like 3 days, and I was one of the hosts. So it was like very, very emotionally difficult for the young person. And then those closers, that those channels being shut down, it also like hit me, uh, and I was I thought I was devastated by that. I was definitely like wounded, and then I decided that I didn't want to work for TV anymore. So I worked for the radio, actually the best radio station, news radio station in Russia, Echo Moskvy, which doesn't exist anymore either because it was
Mm,
shut down in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russia's war in Ukraine. So I worked there. Then I worked to a number of different radio stations. And since I didn't want to work for any state media in Russia, because if you work for the state media in Russia, you understand what it means. Like you need to agree to those rules, and
yeah.
I didn't want to do that. So that was my choice. I worked only for private media, and they were like media after media. They were like closed, shut down, a management changed, something happened. So I was like, like you are trying to escape some maniac who is following you and trying to kill you. So I was trying always to find a place where to work. And then I moved to Ukraine. I worked 4 years in Ukraine as a journalist, and that was probably one of the happiest periods of my career because we started a news radio station there. I learned Ukrainian language. I speak Ukrainian fluently as well, and I worked for the TV as well. And after that, I got a job offer from Voice of America, and I decided to move to voice to the US. Although it was a very tough decision because I was a single mom with little kid, and
Yeah.
but it was difficult. But finally, I was like, I need to take a risk and see how it goes. It's interesting because I just got that job offer and I decided to accept it.
Yeah, no, that's a first of all really great recap of like I know your history, like a long period of your history, and something that I found interesting that I feel like a lot of especially Americans won't really understand as much is censorship within media, whether it's like broadcasted or not. And so that's interesting. You're saying is like how the shutdown overnights. I'm sure were overnight deliberately for a reason, and seeing that I probably already know the answer to this, but for the American audience, like, how does it feel compared to, I guess, when you see how American journalism is and how, like, what they can say? I mean, you go on any online platform here, you see what they say about, like, our president,
Mhm.
whichever way, versus, the media you had to deal with when it came to Putin. Like, was that jarring to you to see, like, the difference between how you can conduct journalism here versus there?
First off, I had this transition period in Ukraine because Ukraine, some people still think, although the war is ongoing and people learned a lot about Ukraine, some people still think it's kind of it's like Russia.
Hmm.
Because it's a former Soviet country and the language is similar. It's not that similar, by the way. So and uh, Ukraine is very different from Russia.
Gotcha.
Very different. So when I moved after working for a number of TV channels and radio stations to Ukraine, I actually was kind of shocked by the level of freedom. They have their own problems. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like sugarcoating everything
Yeah.
related to Ukraine because I love this country. They have their own problems. They have oligarchs, and especially at that time when I moved there, a lot of oligarchs. They're owning their own channels and they had their own fights, but they had a lot of freedom. They have like the variety of those channels and media, and you could have the whole picture if you watched them. They didn't have the situation when all media, even private ones, are concentrated on one hands, because that's what happened in Russia. uh, all media in Russia are concentrated on one hands, although some of them are officially state media. But some of them that are private media, they're still like under Putin. Because, for example, I worked for TV channel Ren TV. It used to be a private channel, but then it was bought by Putin's banker, Yuri Kovalchuk.
Oh, wow.
And so in different ways, they own media, whether it's officially or it's not officially. Like they use like all kinds of ways to control it. If you dig any media in Russia, any media, I mean inside Russia, not in exile, if you dig any media, you will find Putin. And
Hmm.
absolutely different picture in Ukraine. Uh, Different media, different opinions. Yes, informational wars and oligarchs, but it's absolutely just different concept. And also people in Russia. I am Russian, so I don't want to say like bad things about all Russians, but what I dealt with when I worked in Russia, I dealt with a lot of fear, a lot of self censorship everywhere. And again, I worked for the private channels. I didn't work for the state media. And although I worked for the private channels, I still faced a lot of like fear. I saw that in people, like, oh, don't let's just not like cover this event just in case, because they might close us and they will take away our license, TV license. Let's just put it like postpone it, or let's just show it this way or not that way,
Gotcha.
because we are afraid, we all have mortgage, and
Yeah.
none of this in Ukraine. I admire those people because they are not afraid of anything. I mean, maybe some of them are, but the majority, they are not afraid of anything. I saw like people, young journalists who just came to journalism, they could confront like experienced journalists or their bosses. They could say anything to them and argue with them. So they are like, as Ukraine is brave on the battlefield,
Yeah.
Ukraine is brave in journalism as well. So
Love
that's
that.
what I just witnessed. That's why when I moved to the US, I kind of, I got that big injection of freedom in Ukraine. And in US, it's hard for me to say, to estimate like the situation in media, because I worked only for Voice of America, and I would love to work for other American media. I hope will have a chance, even like as a freelancer or something. But it would be very interesting for me. But I cannot judge because I worked only for one media, and Voice of America is a very specific media because it's broadcasting abroad, multilingual language services, so it's not like regular media. But it was also what we did was all like free, without censorship, and only in the last several months after the election results,
Yeah.
I saw again that was actually scary recognition, because I saw that fear in people around me. I i couldn't believe it would be possible in America, because I saw the same thing. Like people are, I'm so afraid of losing my job. Like, let's not post it. Let's not do this, or we need to like find a different angle. And I'm like, oh my God, I've seen it. So that was kind of scary. But other than that, before that, and before we got shut down, by the way, fear never helps. You,
Yeah.
it's better to save your dignity,
Hmm.
even because you will be shut down if they decide to shut you down. You will shut down anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the difference is you will be shut down, like keeping your dignity or without, like
Hmm.
losing your dignity. That's the choice. And it was very important for me to not follow that self censorship fear. So for me, it's on the one hand, I was shocked. On the other hand, it's a little bit of relief that we were shut down, because I didn't want to be in a situation when I'm afraid of losing my job, and I agree to something I think it's unagreeable.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I that you said another thing that's really interesting that I feel like a lot of Americans I think are finding something new, and they're also trying to navigate the waters of that sense of fear that you just said that you've seen, where people are like over here like kind of still scared to speak out against anything they disagree with the Trump administration, and their fear for their jobs, fear of shutting down. Obviously, anyone who's lived in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area
Hmm.
especially has been impacted by the amount of federal layoffs lately. and so a lot of people are scared to speak out. A lot of people are like really confused, and this is
Mm-hmm.
something that I feel like, at least on this scale of like surface level, like, yeah, I'm sure at every, if you're working in the government or you do certain things, there's certain things you can or can't say because of certain reasons. But in terms of like the overall freedom of speech that we glorify over here, as a big selling point for people, that is being attacked in a way that I don't think Americans are used to being. I mean, you see any of the apps we have and any things we develop, it's always so I guess, for lack of a better phrase, like brazen, and it's always like, if we say things without like really even thinking about certain consequences of getting fired,
Mm-hmm.
or getting getting stifled with what we want to say. And so I find that interesting, as someone with your experience and someone who has worked in Russia and dealing with a lot of the things you said about, like, we have to sugarcoat this, maybe, or maybe we have to like delay this until as a better time, being more situational about it, where opposed to somewhere like Ukraine or somewhere like here is like, hey, we have the information. We're going to make sure it's vetted or make sure it's accurate, but then we're going to say it. It doesn't matter if
Mm-hmm.
it's 12 a.m. It doesn't matter if it's in the afternoon. It doesn't matter. We're going to like push the story. So I find that very interesting, and that leads me to another question. In your opinion, like, what is the role a journalist plays in media and then in society? Because I feel like people understand what journalism is, understand what journalists do for a living, but I don't think they understand how important journalism is to the media integrity, and also just like reporting stories and everything that comes with it, but also how much journalism can impact society as a whole, whether it's revealing something that is some criminal activity, or revealing corruption, some stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I think there is still some myth around journalism and the society, and unfortunately, I think it will always be there. We cannot do anything with that, because a lot of people, they think that journalists, their job is not like difficult. It's just you are like talking to people, or if you are on air, like on the radio, you're just talking on air like some nonsense, and that's it's not difficult comparing to other jobs. That is not true, because it's a real job, and and it's very, very difficult and stressful. I was a radio host in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, in Russia and Ukraine, but in Ukraine in particular, I had an afternoon show for 3 hours every day. So and I was in charge of all the the equipment as well. So I had like 5 computers, and I was managing all those computers and the systems, and while talking to people for 3 hours each day. I had a co-host, of course, but still, it's a very, very very difficult work, very. And also like reporters, and if you are film or any role, it's a real job. But what as for the role of journalism, I think it was being changed in the last several years, or maybe even decades already, because with the start of social media, the role of journalism started, the understanding of that role started changing, because everybody kind of could be a journalist. Like we have hundreds, thousands of different blogs now, and who are those people? Like, are they journalists or are they bloggers? And we had that period of time when it was like all mixed up. But I think now, especially now, with what is going on, like everything is going on in America, especially now in America and in Europe, and we've seen like what happened in Russia. The role of traditional media, big channels, newspapers, like big old newspapers, it becomes like more crucial, in my opinion. I mean, I respect everything what people do on social media, and you can still be like a good journalist and a blogger, and you can do like great content. But I think the role of big media is very very is becoming a very important now, because big media, they have their history, they have their reputation, they have their standards, and they should be like that last fortress of trust for the society. uh, and I think it's very very important. So now we have this more like distinguished bloggers and solo journalists and traditional media, whose role is getting more and more important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what people forget about, even like the little details about journalism, is that getting sources, having to late nights and deadlines, and having to understand uh in my opinion, like, journalists understand relationships more than many people, because you have to formulate so many relationships with people, and
Of
especially when you want
course.
to get into doors where they would otherwise be closed to the majority of people or the public. You get into those doors, and a lot of the ways you do that is through forming certain relationships with people, that sometimes give and take, sometimes undercover
And
sources.
risks the journalists take.
Yes, yes, and that's something that a lot of people don't understand too. Is that a lot of people, so you said the difference between like a lot of, like, sometimes bloggers and a lot of YouTubers and things like that. Sometimes you can like just say something into the internet void,
Hmm.
and there's not as much accountability sometimes as a person who went to journalist school, or is someone who works for a big company, and has to make sure their sources are correct. Make sure that if you get something wrong on air, you're going to be checked for it. There's repercussions for that, and you also can spread misinformation, which can be very dangerous. There's a lot of integrity that comes with journalism. You're held at, I feel like, such a standard, like average YouTuber who maybe just be saying stuff and doing things, don't always get held to
Hmm.
as well. And I thought something also you mentioned is really interesting in terms of how much you had to multitask. Like, do you feel like your job, for you anyway, just in terms of all the experience you've gained over the years, do you feel it has become, I guess, in a sense, easier for you personally than, I guess, like maybe during your early, or like maybe like the early rush, like when you first started versus now? Do you feel like the job has gotten easier for you personally, just in terms of like what you personally do for your role, or do you feel like every day or every year, like, something changes to make it kind of like more difficult, or is kind of hard to get a grasp on it?
It's actually hard to get a grasp on it, because so many things you need to learn, like different social media, different
Mm,
platforms, different technologies, AI, like how to use
yeah.
AI in journalism, and whether it helps or it doesn't help, or it's the other way around. So yes, it's in that sense, technologically, I think it's more difficult, because I was only like when I started working on TV, we didn't have any social media. I think I had already my like email something. We just started having like some sort of social media in Russia, and but it was still about multitasking. When you work on TV, you listen to what they say in your ear, and on the radio as well. You listen, you speak, you do those things at the same time. So it was always about multitasking. But now a lot of technology, a lot of technology. Yes, you're right. I remember how I was teaching as well. I was teaching journalism and Russian language at the Moscow University, because I'm a Russian language professor as well. And so I remember how I found that VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the university to show my students how I used to work on TV, and that recording, that particular recording, was the recording of my like of the news we broadcasted, but at the same time it recorded, it was like technical version, it recorded everything that was said in my ear.
Oh, wow.
And they were shocked because they didn't understand anything, and they were like, how could you work like that? Because they heard all the dialogues in my ear,
Hmm.
and they were shocked. it's psychologically difficult, because you deal with that, and you also deal with like tough topics, like covering the war or something. When the war in Ukraine started, since I'm very personally connected to the
Yeah.
country, I felt it like some kind of my mission to cover it as much as possible, and I do have a lot of connections there. So I just worked nonstop, like recording different interviews with people. I started at VOA. We started a podcast. I said I because it was like my idea to start a podcast about Ukraine, and like everything related to that, I was covering feverishly, and I saw it as my mission. And at some point, I had like a burnout, because it was emotionally very, very difficult. And that's what we are dealing with every day. And I can only imagine how felt. I'm not Ukrainian, I just lived there, and I have a lot of empathy and love to that country. But I can only imagine how, like my Ukrainian colleagues felt from the Ukrainian service of VOA. How you like should follow all the standards and be like balanced and neutral, but at the same time, they are bombing like your city, your native city, your family is in danger, and stuff like that. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I had one of my friends. She's Ukrainian, and I had her on the podcast 2 weeks ago, and just seeing the emotion and seeing just her accounting for, like, 'cause basically what I do, like, on this podcast, I like to, like, basically explain to me, like, I'm a kid, so that I can understand different topics, because war is always so multifaceted, and there's so many sides, and there's so many different
Hmm.
objectives that being told. So I like to hear from people about, like, their viewpoint aspect, and seeing how emotionally draining it was, emotionally draining for her to talk about, but also how charged it made her at the same time, because of the passion and love she had for people and her family back home and everything like that. And I can only imagine. I mean, like, you're saying, as a journalist, like, how hard is it when it comes to having to cover things like that are so heavy, and you're so also involved, because I know from over here, we're so far in the states, we're so far removed from some of these wars sometimes, that it's hard to really grasp the severity of everything. It's hard to grasp.
Hmm.
You see it on TV, and thank God for TV, you get to see what's happening, so that you can honestly, like, you can process it more than sometimes, back when radio was the only way to kind of like process things, going back to like the Vietnam War and everything. So how hard is it as a journalist to, like, really just, not, I guess, like, how do you not let it overwhelm you, I guess, in a sense, like, for you personally, like, do you have any steps to help kind of like you go through daily to kind of calm yourself, and in order to do your job and still balance all that, like you said, be a mom, and like just do so many things you have to like balance? How do you go about
Hmm.
that?
My recipe is just to keep yourself busy, but it's individual. So
Yeah.
for some people, they need to, I don't know, to stay away from the certain topic because they get too overwhelmed, or they need to some kind of certain dosage of this or that
Yeah.
news. So let's say they can cover a tough topic, like tragic topic, only related to war, only once a week. I don't know. It's very individual. But for me, the busier I am, the more it helps me, because it gives me the meaning, the sense of what I'm doing. Like, I'm not just sitting here crying, but
Yeah.
I'm doing something actively. I'm covering it. I'm reporting. I'm giving. I can stay neutral. I can just give numbers, like how many people are injured or died, and it will speak for itself. Or I can just quote some officials, and it will always speak for itself. But the more I do, the more I feel myself like involved, and like I do my mission. I follow my
Gotcha.
journalist mission. That's my way of dealing with it. And I just don't have, like, I don't have time for thinking, oh, I'm so overwhelmed, I just want to lay down and cry. No, I because I'm always busy, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
And I need to do something for those people. Also, I like people, and I like their stories. So I I talk to them a lot. I'm being very like curious to people's stories. If I notice something on social media just around me, I'm like, oh, that would be a great story. And it helps me a lot. It helped me a lot while covering Ukraine, because I noticed a lot of stories like that, and it did help people. Just the fact that we covered it, it did help people. Even very like simple stories, like providing Ukrainian books for the American libraries or something, uh, and so on.
No, I think that's really important. Like you said, everyone has like their different ways to process a lot of these things, and the fact that you're able to find what works for you and execute that in itself, it just speaks to like your professionalism and just how long you've been in the game, and just I feel like it could be really overwhelming to cover even me who has no background in both of those countries. So for me, it's like I kind of like an outsider looking in, and just knowing I have friends and people that I care about, that it does tie directly to them. So wanting to be there for them and just like educate myself on what's happening, I thought was an important first step for me personally in doing that. And it's still overwhelming for me. So I can only imagine for people who obviously have so much at stake when it comes to these things, how frustrating it must have been. You know, for example, like when Zelensky went to the White House
Hmm.
a couple weeks back, and how that thing that happened like a day or two after I recorded my podcast with my friends. So, and seeing that, checking up on her, and then going to a recent protest, I think it was like veterans protest in DC
Hmm.
last weekend, and
Yeah.
seeing all those Ukrainian flags there, and just seeing the support, and hearing and really hearing people. I think that's something that I love about journalism, is like being able to really be amongst people and hear what they're saying, you know, and then you taking that and taking their truths, and then putting it giving them kind of like a platform to kind of echo that off of, because it's hard to be heard, especially now with social media and everything. It can be easier to be heard, but at the same time, there's so many people talking that voices can kind of get drowned out at the same time.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
um, so the last question I want to ask is,
Hmm.
opposed to when you first started to now, I know you kind of touched on it throughout the interview, but what is what because the state of media today is really interesting to me, because there's just so much between like streamers, between people
Hmm.
on YouTube or online, and then obviously traditional media.
Hmm.
What is the biggest, like, I feel like, difference to you from like when you started to now? And has I know you kind of talked about it's been like technology is kind of like it's been challenging in that regards, but how challenging has it been, like, or how, I guess it has been a shock to you to see how drastically things have changed in terms of the landscape of journalism from when you first got into now?
I think the most I've been thinking about what was the most like important change. There are a lot of changes, but I think one of the most important changes in media is that now it's almost impossible to hide anything,
Hmm.
uh, because everything has its trail, and because of thanks to technology, thanks to AI as well, the different all kinds of technology, it's getting more and more difficult to hide the information. And that's why, at the same time, we have our challenges related to AI development because of all those deep fakes and stuff like that. And I think that's why journalists now they should use it wisely. Of course, it's just a like a very common thing to say, but I think we should use this possibility. Uh, we shouldn't be afraid of anything, and we should always remember that uh, we, uh, we should always remember that like bad things cannot be covered as they could be before, maybe. I always believed that you couldn't hide anything and the truth will come out anyways. but now it's more and more difficult to hide bad things. So I think we should remember that, and we should use it. We should use technology and the modern technology to serve like good journalism.
Gotcha. No, I think great answer, and I think that that is interesting because as someone who really started doing like podcasting, interviewing, and really like speaking to people and doing news photography and stuff in the last like 5 years, it's always been interesting to hear people who've been the game longer and see how it used to be. Because I was just thinking the other day, like sometimes these like things will come out about people, and it's like how this is even like private conversations that like just come out, and then it's like at the right timing sometimes all these different things, and it's just like man, like it's definitely different because like, I couldn't even imagine like even 15 years ago. Whereas like some of this stuff, not that it wouldn't even come out, but it would just be so much harder. And it's, some stuff are like stuck on like whether it's cassette tapes or stuff like conversation I'd be on so many different things. But now it's like there's Bluetooth microphones, there's all kinds of different technology that makes it easier to report on things or find things. And like you say, the
Yeah,
trail, the digital trail is
and
is
it's much easier to prove that someone is lying.
yeah.
It's much easier to catch someone on a lie. That's why we have a lot of investigative media now, especially after the war, full scale war started, and there were a lot of Russian independent media in exile opened. They started investigate a lot of investigative reporting in Ukraine as well, and fact checking agencies. So it's all like flourishing now, and it's very important.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I like doing episodes like this and getting more into the news opposed to just like, as I was doing before, it was like more entertainment stuff. Now I really do see, how it affects stuff even like back in around 2020 when over here we had a lot of the Black Lives Matter movements and stuff like that, and seeing how disjointed the media was about covering that, and like it was just a bunch of like a lot of grandstanding between what was happening in DC versus the rest of the country. And so that's what really motivated me to really be like, okay, I want to like get more into that and just like I really took my time like learning the journalism route and like learning more about how to be more professional proficient in that, opposed to just like kind of like going and just doing it willy nilly, because there's just so much. You see how important it is. You see that I really felt the gravity of what it's like to do journalism when you do go out there and you really do, you talk to people. I like to be old school. I like to write things down. I'm one of those guys, like I'm in the 1960s. I like to like have my little notebook and write it down just because I remember it
I
more
like
that way.
notebooks as well.
Yeah, I feel like I just feel like it's better for me.
Hmm.
So I do with that, and sometimes obviously I record and take photos of things. I feel like photos are really like photos and news is something I feel like is underrated. It's not appreciated as much. I feel like photos really talk a lot, just as much as videos
Hmm.
do. Especially if you
Yes.
can capture the right situation. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the work you do, and I feel like I really learned a lot, not only from media and journalism, but also like just about you and just about what makes you such a professional and what you do. And I want to give you this time to promote anything, whether social media is where people can follow you or get to know you better and things like that. So the floor is yours to promote wherever you want to promote.
I since I don't have job anymore, I really want to try to concentrate on a freelance work now, and to work on my YouTube channel. I started that channel. You can find me like Ksenia Turkova. It's very easy to find. I started it in the beginning of the war because I saw that there was not enough information about Ukraine, about what was going on in Ukraine and Russia here in America, because people still, for example, didn't understand like simple things like Ukrainian language and Russian language. These are two different languages. Or what happened to Crimea, or what was Navalny's role in Russia, in Russian opposition, and what is really going on in Russia with all the repressions against media, against the society in general. So people didn't have like much knowledge about that at the beginning of the war, and I thought it was very important to explain even some simple things. As I said, sometimes on my YouTube channel I would explain like a meme. There is a meme, but it's very important to break it down, to explain the words and the meaning behind the pictures and words, because it reflects the situation. It shows us some very important angle of the event. So that's, as a linguist, I'm mostly concentrated of like language related topics, but that's how I see my role. I want to explain more to people about Russia, about Ukraine, maybe about the situation in the former Soviet countries.
And that's really also something that's really cool that you brought up about the memes. For people who are a lot younger, I know like every young generation, no matter what decade it is, thinks that they invented something. The old school memes was called political cartoon. And it dates back a very very long time.
Hmm.
And just speaking on what you said about like breaking that down and just seeing the importance about that. But yeah, you're definitely one of the best. And I appreciate your time. And y'all can, if you listen to this episode on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, you also watch the video on YouTube or Spotify only, and you can follow me at Sauceless Entertainment, where we do cover things like this. We want to get more into not only just the different sides of careers, but we also want to highlight people and how they impact what we do every day in society. So thank you all again. Ksenia, thank you again for your time. I'll
Thanks for
see
having me.
y'all on the next one. Goodbye, everybody.